Great Lakes are a peaceful place, a serene place, where gentle spring breezes blow through the maples and the pines, where dune grasses gently wave, where the stupid mosquitoes can grow to be the size of frigging herons, and the humidity can drive you crazy, and the parking can be absolutely impossible, especially on a weekend during peak season, because, let's face it, you have like 3 months to use the beach before you have to go back to shoveling like effect snow again. For most who live on the Great Lakes, all of the preceding sentiment is sincere. This place can save your soul. This place will make you crazy. The Great Lakes are a never-ending reminder that two things can be true at the same time. Hello, and welcome, my freshwater friends, to episode 26 of the About the Water podcast, an exploration of high strangeness on and around the Great Lakes. Today we find ourselves on the far southwestern end of Lake Erie, in Oregon, Ohio's Maumee Bay State Park. Here, we'll get a taste of two things being true at the same time, as the worldly keeps perfect stride with the otherworldly while they stroll together about the water. Episode 26. Make time, always. Kyle, what did you do? The hyperventilating 31-year-old asked himself. What did you do? He was in such a hazy state of disbelief that he could hardly remember his drive east from his home in Toledo, Ohio. He had the 25-minute route to Maumee Bay State Park committed to muscle memory. It was his Lake Erie go-to, located just far enough from the city to offer some solitude. He would go there to celebrate when he was overjoyed, and he would go there to recuperate when he was exhausted. But today was a first. Today, he went out of fear. Oh, Kyle, what did you do? He asked himself once again before stepping out of the car and into the breezy, cool March morning. A small bridge connected the completely empty parking lot to the now-closed visitor center. Kyle stopped halfway, realizing he had left his phone in his car, briefly considering going back to get it. But he knew what was coming if he did. First his wife would call. Where was he? Then his boss would call. Where was he? The thought of either was too much for him to shoulder, so he turned back around, zipped up his light coat, and set off down the boardwalk into the deserted wetlands. Normally, Kyle would have found himself less in his own head and more in tune with his surroundings. He would squint through the trees, eager for that first glimpse of Lake Erie. He would keep an eye out for any interesting migratory birds that were on their annual visit up from Mexico in the warmer months. But all of his thoughts kept returning to that one word that his expecting wife said to him after she returned from her routine checkup with her doctor. Triplets. Triplets, Kyle said aloud. Triplets. Triplets. Kyle looked straight down. Really? Triplets? Way to go, he said to himself. Deciding to take advantage of the isolation, Kyle broke out into a self-assuring monologue. When all at once, he stopped. He felt his shoulders tighten. He felt a strange pressure on the sides of his head, just behind his temples. Someone was right behind him. Kyle. The voice was recognizable immediately and very out of place. Kyle. Kyle spun around immediately, his jaw nearly hitting the boardwalk. Dad? He asked. But there was no one there. Kyle, the voice said from behind him once again. Kyle nearly jumped out of his own shoes. Turning back around, there he was, standing right in front of Kyle with a caring and slightly amused smile on his face, was Kyle's dad. "Dad?" Kyle said in amazement. "What the?" Kyle leaned in for a hug, but his dad took a step back, putting his hand up to stop him. "I've got a bit of I'm not feeling well. I don't want to give you a cold." His dad motioned eastward, farther down the trail, in the direction of the observation deck. "You headed to the nest?" he asked. Kyle nodded. "Well, walk with me," his father said. Over the next half mile, Kyle's dad explained his unusual presence there. Kyle's wife, Maeve, had called him after Kyle literally ran out of the house and then failed to answer his phone several times. "When she said you panicked, I kind of had an idea where you'd be," Kyle's dad explained. "I just didn't think you should be alone. You're not alone in this, you know. You're about to begin the most beautiful phase of your life, Kyle." At the end of the boardwalk was a sight that made Kyle smile every time he saw it. An observation deck that was expertly constructed to resemble a huge bird's nest. The pair ascended the stairs and remained silent for a few moments, gazing out over Lake Erie. "Everything is going to be fine, Kyle. Parenting is instinctual. You'll just know what to do," his father said softly. "Look, I know you're worried about money, and I know you're worried about how you're going to do as a father, and I just want to let you know, no matter what, you will never have enough money, and you're going to screw everything up entirely." The two shared a laugh. "And besides," his father said, "you've always wanted kids anyway, right?" Kyle leaned his head back and sighed. "Not all at once, I didn't," he proclaimed, prompting another round of laughter. After a few more minutes of silence, Kyle's father's face took on a grave expression. I really wish I could have been here for all this, Kyle." Confused and a bit concerned by what he just heard, Kyle put his hand on his dad's back, asking him what he meant by the cryptic comment. His back was ice cold. "Dad, you're freezing." Kyle's dad recoiled from his touch. "Kyle, I need you to listen to me. You're not alone. Your family will be here for you, and there are others who will watch out for you as well." Kyle stepped back. "Dad, you're scaring me. What are you talking about?" With a forced smile that entirely failed to mask the sorrow it was trying to hide, Kyle's dad answered, "I'm sorry I can't be there." Kyle waved his arms. I don't get what you're saying," he replied, almost angrily. "What are you trying to tell me?" His father reached inside his windbreaker pocket and removed a watch band with no watch attached. He observed it for a moment, as if confused by its presence, and then hesitantly handed it to Kyle as he continued. "No matter what, make time for them. Make time, always. Just be there for him, Kyle, and the rest will work itself out." Looking past Kyle, his father then extended his finger, pointing and saying, "Hey, look, warblers, they're early." "Dad, what? What?" Kyle asked as he turned around to look. Then, returning his gaze forward, Kyle suddenly saw his father making his way rapidly down the spiral staircase. Immediately setting off after him, Kyle dropped the watch band that he had forgotten his father handed him. Bending down quickly, he picked it up and followed his dad down the stairs. "All right, Dad, you're really freaking me out here," Kyle said loudly. To absolutely no one. His father was gone. Kyle's brisk pace back to the car turned into a full-out jog as his mind started to put the pieces together, eventually realizing that he had just seen a ghost, and then realizing what seeing a ghost of his own father must mean. The 7/10 of a mile run from the nest back to the car left Kyle completely winded. He flung the door open and grabbed his cell phone, scrolling through his contacts and hitting Mom and Dad, landline. The couple of phone rings took an eternity, and eventually his mother answered. "Mom?" Kyle said. "Mom, where's Dad?" She replied, "Oh, he's in the back, sleeping. He fell asleep watching TV. Hold on, I can get him up." "Mom," Kyle said, trying to catch his breath. "Mom, Dad's dead." His mother's ear-piercing scream caused Kyle to drop his cell phone. As he scrambled to pick it up, he could hear his mother frantically yelling his father's name. "Frank! Frank! Frank!" Followed by his father's voice. What? What the hell, Linda? You trying to give me a heart attack?" Kyle listened in disbelief as the conversation on the other side unfolded. His mother explained to his father that Kyle said he was dead. His father, very much alive, voiced his objection. And simultaneously, they both began to shout through the phone at Kyle. Staring into the hazy distance, with a look of disbelief chiseled on his face, Kyle dropped his phone into the parking lot and sunk back into the driver's seat, uttering the only words that he could think to say. "What the I think you'll be delighted to hear that all 3 of Kyle's babies have arrived and are doing just fine. As are Kyle, his wife Maeve, and the abundantly proud Grandma Linda and Grandpa Frank. Admittedly, as Kyle first shared this experience with me, I assumed probably the same thing you thought initially, that his father did pass and decided to pay his son one more visit before leaving this world. It's a paranormal story we've probably all heard before. When we found out, however, that Kyle's father was fortunately alive and well, this theory gets blown to pieces, obviously. Kyle actually wrote off his entire walk and talk that day as a hallucination, brought on by the sudden stress of instantly becoming a father of 3. And quite frankly, from there, he thought nothing further about it. Until one emotional day, Kyle's sobbing father presented him with a gift. It was an antique South Bend wristwatch that his father had given him when he became a parent for the first time to Kyle's older sister. And as he presented the watch to Kyle, he told him, "Wear it. Remind yourself. Make time, always." He then explained to Kyle that the watch band had deteriorated and the clasp had broken, so he would need to purchase his own. As Kyle told me the story, it was all I could do to keep from just grabbing his coat sleeve and rolling it up to see if he was wearing that watch, which indeed he was. And indeed, the watch band was very, very real. Kyle was and remains very open to any ideas that you and I can come up with here to help explain who or what he encountered that day. So let's look at some of the fine details and maybe make some proposals. And as we do, we'll simply refer to the entity that Kyle experienced that day as Dad. Detail 1. Kyle first heard Dad's voice directly behind him, but then when he turned 180 degrees around, he once again heard the voice directly behind him back in the other direction, at which point Dad first appeared. And then, Dad completely vanished at the base of the spiral staircase to the bird's nest. So it seems as if Dad's existence would lean more on the entirely metaphysical side and less on the physical side, given his ability to appear and disappear without a trace. And he definitely did disappear. At surface level, the boardwalk offers a straight-line view for over 1/10 of a mile from the base of the observation deck, and his real father's ability to physically traverse that distance and out of sight would be impossible. With all due respect, of course, Mr. Frank, sir. Detail 2. While Kyle's real father is a very kind and affectionate person, Dad didn't want to be touched. We saw this first when Kyle offered him a hug. His dad recoiled, sloppily blaming it on a cold that he didn't want to share. When Kyle put his hand on his dad's back, he of course recoiled again then. So maybe in fact, the cold that he didn't want to share was in reference to actual cold. Kyle recalls his dad's back as being absolutely freezing. The best term he could think to describe it was empty cold. Detail 3 would be the red herring that I believe led most of us into assuming that Dad was the actual ghost of Kyle's father. His cryptic comments that he made about his own departure, like, "I really, really wish I could have been there," and "I'm sorry I can't be there," can only lead us to assume that, right? But now that we know that's not the case, these weird remarks leave us with a series of specific questions. Mainly, what on earth was Dad? And why couldn't he be there any longer? So let's dive in. The English call them fetches. The Germans call them doppelgangers. Both are exact, identical copies of a living person. And both are considered, more often than not, as being ominous. Messengers of, if not harbingers of, doom. It's widely believed that the sighting of one's double was a clear indication that death was nearby and imminent. However, Kyle's actual father is, as we said, alive and well. The sighting was nearly a year prior to when Kyle shared the story with me, and everyone, for all intents and purposes, is physically fine. In regards to fetches, it was proposed back in the 1800s that if you saw a fetch in the morning, it was actually a sign of a long life ahead, so fingers crossed that's the case, if a fetch is what it was. Our next option is my personal biggest metaphysical fear here in the Great Lakes, which is the Wendigo. A Wendigo is a monster that is more than prevalent in Great Lakes folklore and has the ability to mimic the voice of family members. The Wendigo uses that voice to lure its victims into the wilderness, where they are then devoured like a Tony Paco's Hungarian dog. Thankfully, I can vouch firsthand that Kyle most certainly was not eaten by a monster. And also, Dad didn't appear to have an ounce of ominousness or malevolence in him. If anything, as Kyle fully agrees, he quite possibly passed along the most important piece of advice that a new father, or an old one for that matter, could hear. His gift remains on Kyle's wrist to this day, and it always encourages him to be the best father he can possibly be, and to slow things down enough to spend quality time with his kids. In fact, the only deceitful thing that Dad appeared to do was fabricate Kyle's wife's call to him, using it to explain his presence, when in actuality may have never made the phone call. The last few threads I found to pull on, in hopes of at least identifying what Dad might have been, are unfortunately quite thin. The first would be familiars, which are entities that assist magical practitioners, which Kyle's father is most definitely not. A friend of mine suggested bilocation, which is a paranormal phenomenon in which spiritual good deed doers like saints or healers can actually split themselves spiritually and exist in two places at once. And while he is a good guy, Kyle's dad would never describe himself as a saint or a healer. Personally, I suggested to Kyle perhaps astral projection. After all, Kyle's father was asleep at home when they took their walk through the wetlands. Perhaps during this sleep, their strong emotional bond allowed Frank to leave his body. And Kyle, setting me up, had me ask Frank this directly, and his words were as follows. "Forget that. I love Kyle, but if I'm going to float anywhere invisibly, it'll be to courtside seats at a Cavaliers game." So perhaps the whole ordeal is something trickier than that, I don't know. Perhaps the whole ordeal is another indication that simulation theory is correct, and the matrix that we all live in just glitched. Or perhaps this could be support for a multiverse theory. Dad was simply another version of Dad from a different dimension in which Kyle didn't have any children. That would explain his apparent knowledge that his own presence was abnormal and explain why he had to leave. However, one theory preventing this theory is that any cross-universe contact would result in the destruction of both universes. When Kyle from this universe touched his dad from the other one, they would simply explode with the power of 1 trillion suns, which would hardly have gone unnoticed. And finally, the most mysterious detail of all of this is, why did Dad seem confused or taken back by the presence of the watch band in his own pocket? He deliberately examined it before he handed it to Kyle, almost like he didn't know what to do with it. It seemed far from a deliberate gesture, that's how Kyle described it. And in terms of explaining that one, Kyle, all I've got for you here is a blank page. And whether we can or can't explain this whole ordeal, Kyle did note that he's very thankful for his experience and his gift. The band given to him by Dad keeps the watch given to him by his real father on his wrist day and night. And Kyle spends every single tick of the second hand that he can with his 3 incredible children, never failing to make time, always. And with that, thank you, sincerely, for making time always for this show. May every tick of your own watch tell a story that's as grand, beautiful, and enduring as our Great Lakes. I'll see you about the water.